Welcome to Sivako, Road to Avatar. My name is Shaun Alexander and I'll be your guide to the world of Pandora and beyond. To support this show, head on over to www.patreon.com/avatarpod, where you can become a patron and gain access to exclusive content. Joining me today on this episode, I'm joined by a very special guest. So, very special guest, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Petros Patsilvas. I am first and foremost a film fan, a podcaster, a father, a lover, and an all-round film obsessive. Just to emphasise that, and I'm very much the the head of the British chapter of the Babylon Hive. I will say that I adore the film Babylon.
Yeah, that's going to be our topic of today, which I think a lot of people are going to be looking at the title of this episode and been wondering, so why is this Avatar podcast covering Babylon? In due time, please let us get to it in a minute. But first, as I do with all my guests, I want to ask you a couple questions. The first of which is, when did you first see Avatar?
I would have seen it on its initial run in cinema. So what, 2009? No, yeah, 2009 when it came out. My recollections of the film, I've only ever watched it the once. I'm not a fan, but I would say I'm an Avatar agnostic. I'm not sure if that automatically kicks me off of the podcast. There's a hello, Shaun, are you still there? Hello?
Oh, I don't know.
But
You're on a bit ropey ground right now. I know, but I'll allow it for this episode.
so but like I remember the situations around it like very vividly, because I remember by the time, when did it came out? In August, right?
It was December 2009.
December, that's right, because it was really frosty when I went to see it. I remember that. It must have been like maybe the beginning of January 2010. And this is quite crass, but I feel is in keeping with talking about Babylon. I vividly remember having to rush home from like the cinema because I really needed a poo. Like, and that's like my lasting memory of seeing Avatar is like, obviously like there are elements of the film that stuck in my mind, but it is kind of embedded in my brain that I really needed to take a poo, and kind of had to like, I don't know, like every minute the train wasn't coming, it was like I was teetering nearer and nearer to absolute embarrassment on a train platform, and it was kind of like that quick shuffle.
I feel
from
like
the train
that's the
station
first time that story's ever been told.
Yeah,
This is the first time I've
is.
had someone admit to needing to take a loo break afterwards in such detail.
I do apologize, but I guess when it comes to Avatar: The Way of Water, that's a lot more fresh in my memory, and there's no bodily functions attached to that film. I saw it the 27th of December, 2022, in a packed out IMAX screening here in Crawley, where I live. And yeah, like sandwiched between two families as that like one lonely nutter on his own in the cinema. And I had a hoot with it. I did realize quickly afterwards, I was like, I don't know like entirely which actor played which role. And then I realized I couldn't figure it out who played who, because I couldn't remember any of the character names to match them up with the actors. So I'm not sure if that was me not paying attention or just being too swept up in it. Because in the moment I was like, oh, I'm in. I'm fully aboard Jim Cameron's vision. And I think it is like, because going into Way of Water, I almost felt like an obligation to see it just as a film fan. But I was kind of won over by it, and like I don't know. I kind of like I'm worried to watch it again because I know I'll never be able to capture like that IMAX experience ever again. And I think that is one thing with films that are like visually groundbreaking and so astonishingly looking, is that you don't get the opportunity to like really get lost in it the same way that you do in the cinema. And it's almost like, I don't know, if I ever were to revisit those films, it would be in kind of like special screenings, either put on at like the BFI IMAX or just kind of in re-releases, because it's, I don't know, I like.
Mm. No, I think you're right. It's something about being in the cinema for a film of that scale,
Mhm,
and that relies very heavily on its visuals and immersing you in it. Yeah, you want to see it in the best possible way,
mhm,
and if you're seeing it in IMAX, yeah, like how do you beat that? Really,
mhm.
honestly, I'm so glad to hear that you enjoy it, had a good time
I
with the
did.
Way of Water.
Well, yeah, it's kind of it's very much like got beats of like a James Cameron greatest hits, like especially in that kind of final third of the movie where you're going, oh yeah, he's doing some Terminator here. Do you know what I mean? He's like got this kind of man who can't be stopped, like villain. And then it's like, oh, he's doing Titanic, like with the kind of trapped underwater sequences. So it's like he's kind of going, yeah, I know what people like. Like I'll throw in a bit of aliens in there for you as well. Like it's kind of, I don't know. I have this theory that like Jim Cameron and uh, Michael Bay are like two sides of the same coin. And I always say like Michael Bay is like the Wario to James Cameron's Mario. Like he's kind of like the Elseworld version of him.
You know what? I can see it though. I understand what you mean.
They love,
It makes
yeah,
sense.
they both love like bombast and kind of both make these like could arguably, I don't know, like, well, I guess Michael Bay is far more like flag waving and jingoistic, and especially with the Avatar films, James Cameron seems to be steering away from that kind of stuff. Like, obviously, you can look at like Aliens and see it as like this thing of like a, I don't know, like a big, a big thing for like the military industrial complex, like aren't the Marine Corps great kind of thing, and whereas like now it's kind of like the 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 Marines are bad, and like whereas if this was a Michael Bay film, it would be very much from the from the focus of, yeah, of the Marines being like, we gotta find these nasty blue freaks and get them and kill them.
It is honestly, I could see Michael Bay trying to do a like, yeah, basically being like, oh, we'll do the human side of this story,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
follow their story, and see what's going on there. I do think Michael Bay is such an interesting one because I think his work. I think as he's getting older, he is leaning a little less towards the American flag stuff,
Mm.
maybe a little bit. I don't know if it's like
I'm a
he's
massive,
getting a bit cynical, maybe.
yeah, I'm a massive defender of Ambulance. I thought that was like some of the most fun I had in the cinema last year, and I know there's people who may be listening to this because I'm on it, who are like wincing at the fact because they've heard me say this so much, like like confessing my love for Ambulance. But like, I don't know. I think in both ways as well. In the way that like James Cameron pushes what you can do with like cinema, whether it is mocap and kind of, yeah, like digital effects and stuff like that, and pushing it forward. I think Michael Bay, and you see it with like Ambulance, he's kind of pushing what you can do with like modern technology and like his use of drones and stuff like that. But like his films are a lot more, I don't know, got a sleaze and a grime to them, whereas James Cameron has this kind of like polished, lived-in quality, kind of everything's super realized. Whereas like, yeah, Ambulance feels like at any time, like Ambulance could crash through the screen and right into your face as you're watching it.
Mm, yeah. Oh man, I need to rewatch Ambulance. It's you're making me really want to rewatch it now. You know what? Let's get on to our main topic then. I think and we're talking about another film from 2022. Was only released recently in the
Mm.
UK a few weeks ago, which is we are talking about Damien Chazelle's Babylon. And yeah, I guess the best thing to start with is why are we talking about Babylon?
Well,
Why do you think we're talking about Babylon?
they're like, I guess we'd have to give a spoiler warning here, right? Is that
Yeah, let's do a big spoiler warning here, and I'll put it at the in the show notes and everything. Hey guys, we're about to probably spoil the movie Babylon for you so if you're part of the, well, I guess 99% of the population of the world who didn't see Babylon, yeah, you're gonna get it spoiled for you. Sorry.
well, the film ends, and I guess like just hearing this out of context, even if you haven't heard the film, you'd be like, "What the hell are they talking about? Like, why? Like, why does this happen?" But the film basically ends near enough with I don't know, like a 3 second shot of Avatar
Yeah,
in this
yeah,
in this montage that is basically like the history of cinema in like a kind of in a in quick succession of just like whipping through all the way from like the first ever like motion picture Sally Grande at a gallop from 1878 all the way right up into Avatar in 2009, and it's kind of like Damien Chazelle is like, that's cinema for you, baby. This is cinema.
yeah. It's so I went and saw it. I saw it late in an evening, and I didn't know that this was going to happen. And so as soon as it got to this moment, I've seen it. I see it. I was like, Wait, what?" And it was like so fantastic. I First of all, I want to say Babylon is a fantastic film.
Mm.
I had such a good time with it, and I'm so disappointed it's not been so highly regarded by everyone. I'm honestly kind of shocked. I think we'll get into it a bit why it might not be connecting with everyone so much. But yeah, I just wish people were giving this one a chance a bit more.
Yeah, it's I do think that there is an easy way out of this film. I think there's something that happens in maybe the first 5 minutes that, depending on your reaction to it, you will either love it or hate it. And I do think it is that kind of film. And in the screening I was in, there were 3 people who walked out, and like from kind of anecdotal research, kind of like because in the lead up to seeing the film, 'cause I saw it like the first opportunity I could, and people I knew had seen it on like opening day, and like reading stuff online, there was like loads of people mentioning like X amount of people walked out of my screening, and seeing the reviews from America and the kind of polarizing um like responses to the film, I just found myself being, I don't know, it made me want to see the film more, because I was like, this could be, and it sounds like a really grand statement to make. Like, it almost feels like this could be the last movie of its kind. Like, I'm not sure about you, but anytime I see an 18 certificate, like my kind of eyes widen a bit, and I'm like, oh, that's something we don't get to see that often here in the UK. Do you know what I mean? Like something that is,
Yeah.
so,
You know what? You make a good point there. I honestly, I so often I go into a film and it does jump out when it's an 18 certificate. So often, certainly in the UK, a lot of horrors are only a 15.
yeah.
I And it's only really in extreme circumstances you see an 18
And
over
like,
here nowadays.
and this film is like what you'd call like a hard 18.
Mm.
There is not like you could see, oh, if they skimmed a couple of seconds off here, this could be a fit. Like this, this isn't the bottom end of an 18. This is like hard in there. Like they have gone all in on like, no, this is going to be full bore like depravity from moment one right up until the end. And I guess even that ending sequence, like some people could be like, that is depraved. Like that is a kind of sickening act on cinema itself. And that is like a response I've seen from people. Like, I think that ending, it goes two ways with people, right? There's some people like, I don't know about you, but I was sat there in the cinema. I felt like Manny. I was like, I might cry. I might cry right now, or I'm really tempted to just stand up and applaud like that gif you see of Orson Welles in Citizen
Mm.
Kane, like just kind of like really austere looking, but just like clapping with all my kind of body behind it. It's like, yeah, it's a real like, I don't know, it's real fascinating stuff.
Yeah, because it what it is, and I've seen people describe it as basically a student's version where of a supercut of just the history of cinema,
Mhm.
and I can see why it's divisive because, yeah, like that's in a way it depends how you want to read it, and I think that's based on how you take this film. So I wonder if we should step back now.
Mhm.
Let's start from the beginning, talk about Babylon as a whole before sort of diving into how people been reading basically
Yes,
that
yeah.
ending. So yeah, like for those who don't know about the movie Babylon, it is from Damien Chazelle, who is the director of great films like Whiplash and La La Land. And it's basically like this look through Hollywood during the age of moving from silent pictures to talkies. And yeah, we're following a few different people in this time. We follow Manny, who is trying to get into the business, and he's not. I mean, so what's his role at the beginning? His job at the beginning, is it elephant handler?
He's like a fixer, right? He's like kind of like party fixer. Like anything that kind of goes wrong, they're like get us the Mexican. I think they call him at one point.
Hmm.
You kind of establishes like how kind of low down the pecking order he is, and like I think he says to it's Flea of all people from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. He says like maybe next time I can be on a film set, and he's like no, you're very much in the right place here. So yeah, he kind of just like any odd jobs that need to be done, he just kind of does it for. I think it's Don Wallach is the studio head of Kinescope Studios, and yeah, he's kind of like with these kind of lavish parties, he does what needs to be done. So you can imagine that would be, I don't know, it'd be like the equivalent of like a PA these days, right?
Yeah, I think it's something that, yeah, pretty much the same sort of role, isn't it?
Hmm.
And yeah, he does well. To put it kindly, he does get the shit end of it
Yeah,
because within, as you mentioned, in the first 5 minutes, there is literally the moment which will decide whether you continue this film or
yes.
not. Which is that an elephant just drops a absolute giant poo on top of two people.
And like onto the lens of the camera as
Oh
well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It is just everywhere. Like it is as gross as you can get. And oddly enough, that's not even the grossest thing in this film.
No, that's not even like the grossest thing in the first like half hour of the movie as well. Like it's pretty grim. Like all of it is like just like and I think I was like that moment I was like, "Oh, I can see why this is splitting people." Like I think Mark Commode said something to the effect of like the film starts with an elephant shitting on someone and goes downhill from there.
Mhm.
Whereas like my opinion was it starts with someone shitting on someone and it gets better.
Well, that's it for me. I think it was such an interesting tone setter, and from there we sort of move into the world of Hollywood and the glamour and the glitz, and we meet the likes of Margot Robbie, and she plays Nellie Leroy, and Brad Pitt's Jack Conrad, who are so Brad Pitt's playing an established actor who is very well known for his silent films and is very hotshot, and Margot Robbie is playing Nellie, who is a up and comer who wants to get into the business as an actress.
Mhm.
And it's interesting to see their two careers. And as you mentioned earlier, actually, I don't know if that was actually mentioned in this podcast or we were talking about it beforehand. There's a big this film is a big old reference to Singing in the Rain.
Yeah, it's it what like what kind of transpires is it's what I find fascinating and like I watched Singing in the Rain off the back of watching this film, which was kind of like a cinematic sin of mine to have not seen it at, like nearly 32 years of age. But it almost feels like, and what's really like great about it is like almost doing like a, I don't know, like a reverse like making of a true story. Do you know what I mean? Like being like, what would have been the stories that Singing in the Rain would have pulled upon to like to make that film, as if these were all real stories, and then the makers of Singing on in the Rain, like Gene Kelly, had been like, "Oh yeah, do you remember like back in the 20s when that happened with Jack Conrad? And do you remember like Nellie Leroy and stuff like that?" And we're kind of like pull these things, and it kind of like it's doing this weird thing of like in the timeline of the film forward referencing, but in obviously the timeline of how we're living, it's referencing back to Singing in the Rain, and I just find it, I just found that like really great. Like, is this big love letter to Singing in the Rain? Like, there's a brilliant rendition of Singing in the Rain at one moment when like Jack Conrad has to like join a load of other stars all in their raincoats, like doing a performance of it.
Yeah. Oh, that there is like so many references to it,
Yes.
and it's so fun as well. Like so I'm a huge fan of Singing in the Rain. I think it's one of my favorite films, and I love the way of using that story and looking at the darker side of it.
Yes. Yeah.
And because Singing in the Rain is pretty much all, happy smiles all the way through for the most part,
Hmm.
because it's a musical, and that's, yeah, like what the musicals of the time were expected to be. And yeah, to see this sort of dark underbelly, which I think is a reflection on Hollywood as a whole, that Chazelle's trying to tell.
I
It's so interesting to see, and I loved it for that.
I think what they both do really as well is obviously like Babylon is a period set film, and well, as is Singing in the Rain as well, right?
Mm.
So like
Yeah.
kind of both set at the same time. But what they manage to do is they both feel so modern. Obviously, like Babylon has the benefit of being made in 2022, but watching Singing in the Rain, it's like, wow, like this doesn't feel dated at all.
Mm.
Like it feels so modern and like just so great and timeless. It is, yeah, like it is. I can understand why it's like a timeless classic because it's fantastic.
Yeah. So, were there particular moments from, well, these are our main three characters for the film. There are a few others as well throughout that we follow. But is there any moments from these characters that really stood out to you?
I guess like that entire 32-minute opening sequence, because it almost feels like it is. It's not, but like, well, I guess there are big sequences of it that are like oneers, like throughout this party. But that kind of set up to the title card is is just jaw dropping. Just everything that's going on, like kind of going in and out of this party, managing to like establish everyone that we're going to follow throughout this film, basically, like including Lady Faye Zhao and Sydney, the trumpet player,
Mhm.
just all at this party. Yeah, all of that, and it kind of, I think it sets out the stall of what you're in for. Like from, yeah, people getting shot on by an elephant. We get um, an overweight gentleman being pissed on. We get somebody like a champagne bottle shoved up their ass, like somebody ODing, copious amounts of cocaine. Like we kind of like it's just an assault on the senses. And then when you kind of get that and like the title comes up, it's almost like it just gives you a chance to just like exhale because you feel like throughout that first, yeah, it's 32 minutes, you're like, oh, my chest is tight, like in a kind of like, I don't know, almost like excited, like I can't believe what I'm watching. And then I just think that is a real ballsy way to open a film. And yeah, I love that the opening title doesn't come in until such like a long way into the film. And then I don't know, it's a film that's made up of just amazing little set pieces. I think like that first day on set when Manny manages to tag along with Jack Conrad and they're there sit on the like kinescope lot and we're seeing like the way that films would have been made, like just multiple sets going on at once, or multiple movies being filmed at once. And yeah, Nellie Leroy's kind of first day on set as well, and the way that like she looks haggard and kind of like she's been partying till like 4 in the morning, has like 3 hours sleep, gets onto set and is just like, the moment that they kind of call action and she like, you kind of get that cling on her face, is like, hey, boys. And it's like, yeah, like it's so like jubilant. And like that again, that feels like another long, like 20 to 30 minute sequence. And it's kind of broken up into these great little moments within it, whether it's all that stuff on the set, and then we get that great moment of what, like where Manny's got to get to like a camera shop to rent the camera and get back in time, and that's like scored to like, yeah, that like that amazing like
Mm.
and then like it's all this big rush to get like the ultimate shot at the end of the day. And yeah, like I like that stuff. And that, well, I've basically said the first hour of the film so far, haven't I?
I mean, yeah, we could just break it down. Keep it feels like it though that you could just honestly just keep grabbing little half-hour sections and being
Mhm.
like, "Yeah, that's my favorite section," and then you'd watch the next half hour, and be like, "Oh wait, now I think it's this section."
Yes.
And but for me, definitely that first day on set is for me is my favorite personally, and I think it's to do with that final shot of them getting that shot.
Mm.
Everyone's standing around watching as they get like this the golden hour, the sun's just at the right point as everything kind of comes together finally, and
I
I
like
think it's that it speaks to something about the sort of the magic of capturing those moments
I
that
yeah,
just last a lifetime.
I love the casting as well of Spike Jonze as this like madman French director, the German director. Like it's kind of like really inspired casting, because he does it so great that there's like so much comedy with it, but at the same time like such menace, and like yeah, like when they get it, it's a kind of like jubilant. And I do, yeah. That moment is you feel it, right? Like, again, you want to kind of like get up in the screening and like applaud that they've managed to do it, considering like everything leading up to it. Like we kind of get that montage of Jack Conrad just getting hammered in his dressing room, and you're like, oh no, you're not going to pull this off, Jack. And it's like he just like, yeah, when the camera's rolling, he's just like the ultimate professional,
Mm.
nails it, like yeah, stumbles into the shot, and then it's action, boom, here he is. Butterfly lands on his shoulder just as the sun's going down, and you get that like swell from the orchestra. It's like, oh, it's beautiful.
Mm. Yeah, just it really captures something for me, and I've I'm gonna admit it's probably because I studied film at university, so something like that really speaks to me and like why I wanted to study film in terms of being like, my God, like just those moments where you just capture something that you just didn't think you could,
Mm.
and it works out so perfectly, and it all feels worth it, all the stress, all the mess that come before it, just to capture that one moment.
And I think like this film could be argued that it's like very inside baseball, like for filmmaking. But I do feel like there is an element that like everyone kind of has that in their working day, right? Like just
Yeah, yeah.
managing to like nail something like before a deadline, or just I don't know. I don't
Yeah, just things lining up as you need them, and
yeah.
it feeling that satisfaction that yeah, it all worked out in the end. And yeah, it's really interesting when you sort of I consider like that first day sequence as almost like a smaller part of the whole story, which is this whole look at Hollywood and how there is so much mess to it and so much awfulness, but this final montage maybe speaks to that final, yeah, like having capturing that one moment.
Mm.
And I think that's maybe what Chazelle was trying with it.
Yeah, I think there's like, and he's trying to say, right, that it is worth it, like, because when you get to that moment and the butterfly landing on the shoulder, it is like all of that leading up to it has been worth it. And like kind of obviously outsiders looking in, they might be like, all of this money that's like put into films. And I recently recorded an episode of my podcast about like on-set fiascos and like troubled productions. And some films on that list and some films we discussed on that episode, like Apocalypse Now, is like, well, that's one of the greatest films ever made. But like it was an absolute nightmare to make. But when you kind of get to the end product, you go, was it worth it? Yeah, I think it was. Like, like
Well, I think a perfect example as well, like if we come back to one of Cameron's films, is Titanic.
yes, which was mentioned
It's
on this on that very same episode.
as I imagine, yeah, like it was a disaster making that film. Genuinely, it was awful for everyone involved. But was it worth it? I think everyone involved would probably say yes. They would do it all again.
Oh yeah, I'm sure James Cameron's accountant would say it was very worth it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's I think Babylon's such an interesting way to, yeah, like approach this sort of story of Hollywood, because I do feel like there is a habit of Hollywood to do that sort of self congratulation thing, but this is, if anything, shows so much the worst side of it.
Yeah, warts and all. And
Yeah,
one of the like one of the things I think it gets so right, and I guess like this is like for me, like this this wins makeup for me on at the Oscars for one reason and one reason only, is something that I'm always pulled out with on period set films is teeth. Like you watch westerns and stuff like that, and people have got glistening white teeth. The teeth in Babylon, even like down to like Nellie Leroy, they just look a bit grubby. Like everyone looks a bit like, I don't know, especially when you get to Toby Maguire's character, like
oof.
with like the worst teeth ever, but like it like this kind of yellowy teeth. But everyone's kind of got a bit of yellowy to like. Do you know what I mean? Like the characters look lived and look a bit grubby, and like that first day on set, particularly with Nellie Leroy, like Margot Robbie looks kind of all a bit bent out of shape. And it's like you would imagine that's what it probably was like the especially with the studio system. It's like it was a job. It wasn't this kind of glamorous thing of like, oh, we shoot for like 40 days and then like you go for a nice holiday. It was like, no, you finished a movie, we're starting the next one tomorrow.
Mhm.
Boom, boom, boom. You get paid your like monthly salary, and like, yeah, you look back to like Judy Garland, like around the time and stuff like that. And I think her and Mickey Rooney have talked about the fact that they were making movies and then finishing and wrapping, and the same afternoon they were on to the next one and getting paid like $300 a week for the privilege of it, which like was pennies compared to some of their co-stars who were kind of like day players or like production players, which is insane.
Yeah, and I think you brought up Toby Maguire, and I think that once again another like extended sequence
Hmm.
which sees, if the opening of Babylon is like meant to be gross but in a sort of like fascinating, like, oh, this party looks a little bit too over the top for me, but I probably would still go.
Hmm.
Toby Maguire's section is the, I never want to see this person or experience any of this in my life ever
Yeah,
side
like
of it.
the place he takes them to is referred to as the arsehole of LA. I don't ever want to go to anywhere that's referred to the arsehole of anywhere.
No. And it genuinely is, it turns a little bit into a horror film at that point,
Yeah.
because you're just descending, and I've seen people refer to this as like descending into hell.
Hmm.
And I think there's definitely a lot of sort of biblical things going on here throughout the whole movie. But yeah, like he's just seeing all of this, the grossest side of LA, and seeing everything wrong with it, and how far people have lost their way.
And I think Tobey Maguire is the perfect casting for that character. Not to say he is like that, but I know that Tobey Maguire kind of, there are stories about him, and I know that him and Leo at one point were a part of a gang that I think they called themselves like the Pussy Patrol or something like that. Like the
I think
Pussy
I think
Posse.
that might be the In-Betweeners
It's
one.
it was the Pussy Posse, that is it.
That's it.
And they yeah, sorry, yeah, Pussy Patrol. Uh, um, that and yeah, he is Mr. X in Molly's Game as well. That is who that's based
Yes.
on. So I
Yeah.
think he does understand like the darker side of modern Hollywood. So I imagine like it wasn't that far of a stretch for Toby Maguire to like inhabit this character who is like, I don't know, probably him giving into the deepest and darkest of his base urges as an actor.
Yeah, I think you're right. His casting is so perfect because of that experience he has. But also, I think it works great when you compare it to something like he was like the lead in Charming Man of Great Gatsby,
Yes.
and but he was so clean cut in that that this works as such a polar opposite,
Mhm.
and the time periods they were set in are so similar
Mm.
in that it would feels like yeah, it's like night and day between the two.
Yeah, and I know that Damien Chazelle has said in interviews that Toby Maguire actually like was just somebody, one of his producers, I think it was Matt Bluff, knew, who had worked with, and when they were doing table reads for Babylon, would just like come and do any of the table reads and read multiple characters uh throughout the table reads. I think at one point he read what is his name? PJ, the assistant director who works with Damien Chazelle's wife on like in that amazing sequence where it's the first ever talkie. Like
Yeah. Oh, that's again, this is it. It's
yeah,
so perfectly cut up into like little moments
vignettes. Yeah,
that
yeah.
yeah, that every time I'm sort of like, man, that's maybe my favorite, and that again is such a standout one of of Nellie Leroy experiencing a talkie for the first time, trying to work with it,
That
and just the chaos of it all.
well, it's just that like I love it. You've got that guy who keeps going like who's doing like the like calling the card, and then you just have someone who's like in the off screen just going Mark, and like each time it gets more and more defeated, and just the way it's filmed, like the camera whipping round to the sound booth, and like you've got this kind of bomb under the table of the cameraman locked in this box, and like it's kind of like you're just waiting for what is going to go wrong, and that like explosive ending of that scene of like yeah, the cameraman just falling out of the box dead, and like everyone just kind of in the interim just losing their minds, and like yeah, who's the PJ Byrne who plays
Mm,
Max,
he's so
just
good
getting
in
like
that.
more and more amped up as it goes on. I absolutely like he's an absolute scene stealer in that.
Yeah, he kills it in that, and I just adore that sequence for yeah, like the sound design as well, because every like piece of electrical equipment has its own like sound to it, and it sounds like they just turn up the volume on them all, so you can hear the buzz of the lights.
Yeah, like I think yeah, he has a go at Ruth Adler, Olivia Hamilton's character about. I think she's got like a metal rod in her leg from an injury, and like I know that Margot Robbie like in like one of the takes of it like was like took a tennis racket from that set and was like hitting the mic, and like that didn't get in, but like something that wasn't scripted was like her punching the sound man, and like I think that like it is that thing of like capturing the moment, and like that perfectly like encapsulates the frustration that must have been felt of like obviously not just that this is a new way of doing things, but I guess the advent of talkies for a lot of people, I guess it was like the party's over, right? Like they had this sense of we have kind of been not getting away with it in a sense, but like we've mastered what we've done and we've been able to do it. I guess an analogy for like just working day people is just getting shit hot at your job, whatever it is. Even if you clock in at you know you can clock in at 9, bish bash bosh, get your job done. It might be in an office, it might be I don't know, on a building site, whatever you do, you know you can do it. Like, and you know, at night I can have 6 beers and I can go in. And they knew we can go hard at night, do it in the day, and like repeat. And then the advent of talkies would be like, yeah, in your office being like, oh, we're bringing a whole new database system or something like that. And you guys have got to learn whole new practices. So I guess that scene, and I guess like the latter half of this film, is people realizing that like not just like the thing we love is changing and some people aren't cut out for it, but our way of living is basically dying. And I guess that makes this film kind of relevant because cinema is always shifting and changing, and especially now we're always on the precipice of like it feels like we're losing something, whether it is the theatrical experience, like I guess in the like I don't know, I remember the late 2000s, it was like, oh, cinemas have stopped projecting 35 mil and it's all DCPs now, it's all digital. And like throughout cinema you've seen these, like I know the 90s it was right, we're having multiplexes everywhere, and like it's always in a state of flux. And I imagine throughout Hollywood there is always this feeling and these ebbs and flows of like the way we used to do it is dying out, and I don't know, I guess yeah, you get that kickback and that fear, and I think this film perfectly encapsulates that fear people must have felt.
And I think that brings it so neatly onto that final montage in a way of this build up of seeing the history of cinema and I think a big thing of this is that a lot of these films are not just obviously like important films, but they're also the showing the way in which the film industry is changing at the time as well.
Yes.
So things like the arrival of the train, a
Mhm.
trip to the moon. You had Wizard of Oz there, the jazz singer, and it was sort of like this build up of seeing how history has progressed and how the industry has changed from the time that Manny would have started in it in the silent era to going through the talkies and then seeing on beyond it all and how and that's where it brings us up to the more modern ones. So things like Tron, Terminator 2 is included, Jurassic Park, The Matrix, and then Avatar as the final sort of modern film.
Yeah. Well, it's like we have gone that, like, and Damien Chazelle has said he like, and you'll be happy to know this. I think he had to get Big Jim to sign off on the Avatar and Terminator 2 clips. Like he actually I think
I
Big
can just
Jim's the
imagine
guy
that
he had
phone
to speak
call.
to. Yeah, like hey Jim. So I've done this montage. I could send it over to you, but what do
It's
you
missing
think
two
of
films.
it?
I need T2 and I need Avatar. Don't ask why.
Well, I guess Big Jim could look at it, especially with ending on Avatar, is like cinema has hit its final form. Do you know what I mean? Like this is like, but I guess it is like that is the film to look to because it is like we have got away. Like if you look at the first thing mentioned in that is just a horse galloping. So that is natural. That is nature. That is a human. That is a horse. And then all the way you get to Avatar, and it is like
The Navi jumping off the side of a floating mountain, riding sky dragons.
exactly, and it is just like everything is pure imagination. It is not a single kind of living organism on screen. It is all kind of it's all digitally made, and rendered to look like flesh and blood, but isn't. And you can see why Damien Chazelle did that. And I think the interesting question to ask is, what is his stance on it? Like, is he like, I like, I don't think he's been explicit in, I personally feel like he thinks it's a good thing, but I think there's the debate to be had is he saying it's good or is he saying it's bad? Like,
Yeah, I think you know what this, and I've seen people mention this online, and it's in particular to do with one shot that's in the montage, which is we see a title card come up that says "Fin de Cinema," so as in the finale. But then the montage continues on past that, and
uh,
that's where we get into the technology side of things, the things like Tron and Avatar, which makes I can see the argument being that once it hits that point, afterwards it's seen as being like, "Oh, have we gone too far?"
mm,
As
yeah.
that's the argument I've seen some people make. Do I agree with that? Absolutely not. No.
No, I think it's just a thing of like, because yeah, it subtly just adds in more and more like digital sequences, right? Because I know like Tron isn't digital, but kind of like is
Attempts to
early.
be.
Do you know what I mean? It's kind of proto. Like I think that was a lot of like shell shading, like them
Mm.
painting, yeah, painting over the film and stuff like that. But then when you get to Terminator, it's like that's kind of like the advent of CG as we kind of know it today, and then Jurassic Park, and yeah, like the Matrix is like, well, yeah, the Matrix we're doing things that like at the time it's like, well, we haven't seen this, we haven't seen bullets bend like this before, we haven't kind of seen cityscapes kind of bend in weird ways like it does in that. And I think, yeah, I think I don't think I personally don't think he's saying it's a bad thing. I think he's just saying that cinema is always changing, and I think that there's an optimism to it. Like, yeah, we might think that the theatrical experience is dead, but like, I'm sure that people thought that. Like, people thought that when TV came out. Do you know what I mean? They're like, that's it. Um,
Mm.
they people thought that radio was dead when movies came out. People thought that filming on film was dead when digital kind of caught up, and but people still film movies on film. Like, I'm pretty sure from looking at it, Babylon was shot on film. Like,
It's yeah, it's so interesting to think of this final sequence as a way of to me it's all about those wow moments of
yeah,
cinema throughout the history. And it's different for everyone. Like obviously for our generation, the films like Jurassic Park and The Matrix and even Avatar are our wow moments. We weren't around to experience the first talkie. That's
mhm,
so we can't have that wow moment. Every film we saw as a kid was a talkie. So yeah, it's interesting to think, yeah, like, and I think it's something to do with there was a conversation that's in the film between Brad Pitt's Jack Conrad and Gene Smart as Eleanor St. John, which is to do with the legacy of cinema
mm,
and the legacy that you leave. And it's about how he, despite the fact that he might die, he will leave a legacy and people will feel like they know him through his films years and years after he's gone. There'll be people who are born after he's died who will feel like they know him personally.
mhm,
And I think that's a little bit of what Chazelle's trying to capture there, is to say it doesn't matter that cinema has changed so much since it began.
mhm,
It's still there. It's still the same, me sitting in the cinema watching Babylon is the same as Manny sitting in the cinema watching Singing in the Rain.
yeah,
If we're having that experience and feeling connected to it, it doesn't matter what you've watched. It's the same experience. You're still feeling that buzz.
yeah, and like I'm sure we could all have that experience of like watching a film and like having that kind of out of body experience and all those films we've watched that gave us those moments. I think Chazelle has just boiled it down to this list of movies that are impactful, and like I don't think he's 38 years old, so I don't think he's an old man wagging his finger at people saying like, "We messed it up." Do you know what I mean? Like, because
Mm.
what, his first movie came out not even 10 years ago. So,
Yeah, like,
like,
so he's only been making films, you know, he's only 38, so that makes it, he's in the sort of same generation as us, in that he is experiencing it at the same pace as us in a way. So yeah, it does make you wonder, like, does he have those same views? Yeah. It's hard because we're obviously we're in this sort of generation of so much change constantly.
mhm,
And I do that, and I think something like La La Land is such a throwback to, that wide-eyed love of old Hollywood and musicals and such, that people have probably preemptively read Babylon as being the same, when I don't think it is. It's quite as
not
simple as
at all.
that.
Yeah, and it's a film. What I find crazy about it is, where does a director go from this film? Because like I've heard it been referred to as like the last film. Do you know what I mean? Like whether that is like Damien, like it feels like it like does Damien Chazelle just duck out after 4 movies? Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like I go from First Man to what is essentially like the last movie ever. And I think like it's a big swing because yeah, like I said earlier, it feels like this film in a way is like could be the end of these high budget made for adult grand follies.
Mm.
I can't, especially the way that cinema is going, especially seeing it in cinema. Do you know what I mean? Like, and even I don't know, even Netflix seem to be pulling back from giving auteurs like their kind of blank check and being like, make whatever movie you want. Like, I imagine after White Noise and kind of like they were probably hoping big things for that at the Oscars and the lukewarm reception of that, they're going to think again about giving like a an auteur director like $100 million check if it's not gonna pay back. And I think I don't know. You've got to tip your hat off to Paramount for just really going. You know what? We're going all in on this movie. Like it's what it's reported like $80 million budget, which
It's
like
so it is done so poorly. This is it's horrifically doing bad at box office. So yeah, the budgets are reportedly 78 to 80 million, and the box office currently sits at 50.5 million, which means minimum it's made $30 million loss. But when in reality, it's probably done at least $100 million loss.
yeah, yeah, because we're not even talking about like
Marketed,
promotion. Yeah,
and this is the thing. This is a film that's been marketed quite substantially, I would argue.
yeah, and I was in from the marketing, like as a big like fan of yeah, like Hollywood cinema, especially from like the 70s. Um, Immediately when I first saw the first trailer for Babylon, and there's a real cheap gimmick they do, but I kind of was enamored by it, and I was sold on it. Was they have the stars from the Paramount logo disappear as you hear Margot Robbie snort a line of coke, and I immediately just thought of Bob Evans, the studio head of Paramount in like the early 70s, and was like, he like that feel like it feels like he would have loved that. That's like the ultimate tribute to Bob Evans in that like he was this kind of cocaine snorting um I don't know, Hollywood wild man. And it's yeah, it's great that Paramount have taken a punt on this film.
Yeah, it feels a film out of time nowadays. Like, if you had told, with different actors in place, this is a sort of film I would expect to see more from the sort of 70s era, where big risks were getting taken.
Hmm.
And yeah, we just don't see films like that anymore. And I do want to bring it back to the idea that this feels like a final farewell for a director, not a someone who's still kind of starting off their career. Like, to me, if someone like Tarantino was saying, put this out as their final film,
Mhm.
I'd understand it because it fits in with that sort of narrative. But yeah, what I don't. I'm so curious to see what Chazelle does post this.
Yeah, well, like, weirdly, Tarantino kind of did that with his final film. Well, with his second to with the last film he made, with like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That feels like a kind of, it's my love letter to Hollywood, like, and it's great. It's great. And we're living in an era of people writing their love letters to Hollywood. Like
Mm,
even The Fablemans by Spielberg, as much as it is a personal story about him and his family, it's almost like his love letter to, yeah, to cinema. And it's like this is kind of in this recent spate of them that we're getting. And yeah, Babylon kind of, I don't know. I think it's one I'm going to be revisiting time and time again for sure.
yeah, it definitely gives me the feel of one I would love to even revisit back in portions
Hmm.
just for that little buzz that it gave me in the cinema.
Yeah.
I do have one question for you, which is, what would you add to that final sequence, that montage?
Oh,
You have to add one film that's post Avatar, let's say.
post Avatar. Um,
It's a hard one, I know. I've thrown this on you.
yeah, you've really thrown it. You've really what I like. This is like what I think another director would have done, and I would have thought would have like been a real ballsy move. Well, like, because there's two ways you can look at it as well, right? There's the thing of like Avatar is the like, I don't know, almost like the final form of cinema getting away from the natural and being totally artificial. And I'm not saying that in a disparaging way. I'm just saying like how far it has come. I don't know if anything has like surpassed that. I think a funny joke after that would be a shot from Ready Player One, just to see like kind of, especially one of those sequences of like every kind of pop culture character that you know and love from every movie and kind of like yeah, thing you've ever seen all kind of colliding would be, and I think that would be the clear indication of cinema has gone too far and we are now just kind of a snake eating its own tail of like, all we want is give us things we know and
Mm.
things we've seen before. Like, I think that would have been funny. I think it would have been quite funny if he had like put in a clip of one of his own films.
See, I was thinking that, and I was like,
Like La La Land, like
it'd be really funny if he was like, "I'm just gonna put in a clip from First Man, seeing as none of you guys saw it the
yeah.
first time, so you can watch it now."
Or just like after the Avatar, you just get the clip of Fletcher throwing the chair at Andrew Neiman, like, and
Oh,
Miles Teller ducking, or
mm,
that final shot of um of Whiplash, kind of
mm,
Andrew on the drum kit and that like look him and Fletcher have, like
yeah.
that. But then again, that's just because that's a great final shot of that film. Yeah, I think it would have been a hilarious ballsy move of Damien Chazelle to put one of his own films in there, but.
If I ever get a chance to ask, I'll ask him why he didn't.
But as for like a personal choice, does it have to be post?
Oh, you know what? No, you know what? Let's widen it out.
I will have. I would have the Michael kissing Fredo moment from The Godfather Part Two.
Mm. You know what? I'm gonna say this. I don't, this is just a side point, but there's several points in this film where Manny looks really like Al Pacino.
Yeah, and like what, like gotta say, Diego Calva, like what a kind of
Oh my
find.
god, so good. He is incredible.
Yeah, like he looks like, in the best sense, he looks kind of weathered and real, and that's what I mean. The people in this they look real.
Yeah. No one has that Hollywood shine to them where they look like they've
Listen,
just walked out their trailer, just
mhm.
had their makeup done. Everyone's got like a layer of sweat on them constantly,
Yeah,
but the
even
gross kind of sweat.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's a perfect summation of the film. Is there's a layer of gross sweat on it, and I've just remembered the snake sequence in the middle of this film, and it's like again, it's like yeah.
Again, it's another moment where you could just watch, uh, and it makes me wonder if at some point, like how someone did for The Irishman oh, you could watch The Irishman in like these 3 parts.
Hmm.
I wonder if someone could do the same for Babylon in putting it into like a mini series of a way to be
Yeah.
like, here's these different moments. And I think it would work just as well, honestly.
Mhm. I hope that there is an outtake somewhere as well of Margot Robbie in that moment with the snake saying, "Hi, my name's Nellie Leroy, and welcome to Jackass."
Yeah, it had a big Jackass vibe. I
Yes.
loved it.
And to that point, I saw somebody point out on Twitter recently that there is a moment when Manny's walking the streets in the 1950s in the kind of
Yeah.
final sequence of it, and in the background you can see portion of the billboard for Jackass Forever.
See,
So
that's
this
my
shared
answer for the
universe.
film you have to add. You have to add Jackass Forever.
Oh, that would be perfect. Yeah, it's a Paramount film. Oh, Johnny. Yeah, if it ended with Johnny Knoxville being launched out of that cannon, yes, please. Like that is pure cinema. Like if we're talking pure cinema, yeah, Jackass Forever's in there.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure talking to you about this film. I
Thank you so
I
much.
feel like I've been dying to talk about it in some way, and the fact that Avatar shows up in the film
Mhm.
just made it a perfect opportunity to.
I feel so good. I feel like I've kind of managed to vomit out as much as I can say about this film, that there are people in my personal life who will be very thankful that I've managed to get it out of me. Like people who haven't seen the film, be like, "Oh, you gotta watch it." You know, and like really trying to restrain from just like I don't know, verbal vomiting out like everything that happens. And like, I've been trying to pester my parents to watch it, somewhat like trepidatiously thinking they'll hate it, but like I almost want to watch it with them to like take some glee in their reactions. Do you know what I mean? Like almost like, oh, like, you're gonna see a man having a champagne bottle shoved up his bum. Like, wow, how are you gonna react to that?
Yeah, it's just one of those ones where I do want to hear more and more opinions on it, and I hope the fact that now it's on digital in America, and we'll probably at some point in the next few weeks get it digital in the UK. Is that we could just have more and more conversation open up about it. There was one thing that we did not mention, which I think is a crime we haven't talked about, is that Justin Hurwitz's score is just so good. The music in this is unreal.
I have been ingesting everything I possibly can about this film in regards to interviews, and like the fact that music for this was written at like the storyboarding stage, and
Mm.
especially like the relationship that Damien Chazelle and
Justin Hurwitz.
Hurwitz have together is fantastic, and it's I love especially and it draws back into that final montage sequence that it's kind of takes all of the score we've heard throughout the film and kind of like merges them like one. It's like a reprise of all of them at the same time, and you almost get like the introduction of like an 808 kick in there that like makes it feel super modern and stuff like that, and like these kind of house like disco hi hats you get like pulsing through it, and there's that great kind of oriental riff you get in there as well, like that kind of East Asian like and that there is a sound on this soundtrack, and it's in that opening sequence, and I think it's the final sound you hear in it, and it's like that wang, like that kind of like ringing out, like I don't know what it would be like, that kind of like weird little harp that you put in your mouth and just like clang it.
Mm.
It's like a weird little. It does have there's a name I know it by, but I don't think it is what it is called, and I think it's like a derogatory name for it. So I don't want to say it, but yeah, there's a sound. Listen to Babylon on the soundtrack. It's about 10 seconds long, and it's the sound that ends that that ends that piece of music.
Yeah, it's overall just that musical score is so good, and Yeah, I would implore people, if you want some good background music
Mm,
just to get you pumped,
yeah.
that's the one to go to.
I've been on a treadmill with I think the song Coke Room off the
Mm.
soundtrack, and that kind of saxophone riff repeats throughout the soundtrack in different forms, and like it really keeps you going. Like you get that momentum. You're kind of like you want to push yourself forward without kind of extracurricular substances to help you along the way.
Yeah. So yeah, just a huge thank you for coming on. And yeah, where's the best place for people to find you?
You can find me on all social medias at Caged In Pod, where I host Caged In and Caged In Coppola Connections, which are kind of an umbrella podcast where I talk about all things Nicolas Cage and the wider Coppola family. Um, I was looking for an excuse to talk about a Babylon, my podcast, and I think at some point I may do it just because Spike Jones is in this film and at one point was married to Sofia Coppola, so that as as you found a way to speak about this film with those 3 seconds of Avatar, I think I can do it with somebody who used to be around the dinner table at Christmas.
Oh, you know what? I think you have more of a
Stake
account
the
for it
claim.
than I. Yeah, exactly, a bigger claim than I do. 3 seconds, and it's what a beautiful 3 seconds, eh?
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, thank you everyone for listening. This is a bit of a different one because yeah, this is a very non-Avatar discussion episode. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed and go check out Babylon. And I want to hear your thoughts, please. I want to talk to as many people about Babylon as possible. Yeah, until next time, thank you all and goodbye. Thank you for listening. This week's episode is dedicated to our patrons Eric Scrock and Patrick Regal. To become a patron, visit www.patreon.com/avatarpod.